One wrong decision, one moment of unimaginable terror. That's all it takes to create the most horrifying deaths ever documented in human history. They're stark reminders that no amount of preparation or will to survive means anything when pure evil decides to claim its price. It was May 6th, 2015. The red rock spires of Canyonlands shimmered under a merciless sun, the sandstone radiating heat back into the still desert air. By mid-morning, the temperature had climbed past 90 degrees, transforming the island in the Sky District into a furnace. I was supposed to be another solo climbing adventure, but it would end up a cautionary tale about the desert's hidden dangers. Roberta Robbie Mendez, a 42-year-old high school science teacher from Flagstaff, Arizona, stood at the base of Devil's Coffin adjusting her small hydration pack one final time. Robbie had logged over 50 desert tower summits during school breaks. Her students knew her as intense and unshakable, while climbing partners called her meticulous and stubborn. Robbie had chosen Devil's Coffin specifically for its solitude. The 200-foot tower featured a tight chimney route rarely climbed due to loose rock and awkward geometry. She'd studied the topographic maps extensively, marking water caches and tracking microclimate patterns in her detailed notebooks. But that morning, mechanical trouble at camp delayed her start until after 10 a.m., hours later than planned, but she decided to proceed anyway. A group of climbers on a nearby wall watched Robbie enter the chimney using classic technique, bracing her back against one wall while pressing her feet against the other. She moved steadily upward, her form textbook perfect as she navigated the narrowing slot. Everything looked routine for the experienced desert climber. By noon, the temperature on the wall exceeded 100 degrees. Cole Hammond, climbing the adjacent formation, noticed Robbie had stopped moving. She was wedged between the narrowing walls, her body turned diagonally, arms trembling visibly from the extreme heat. Hammond shouted across the gully, offering assistance, but Robbie only nodded and attempted to reverse her position. 2 minutes later, disaster struck. Her body convulsed, then stiffened. She was completely stuck, unable to move up or down in the tight chimney. The combination of extreme heat, physical exertion, and her awkward position had triggered heat exhaustion. Over the next 45 minutes, Hammond and his party watched helplessly as Robbie struggled desperately. She tried to free her arms, twisting and straining, but her position only worsened. Her helmet tilted sideways, breathing becoming increasingly erratic. Eventually, she slumped slightly, wedged firmly in place by her own body weight. Hammond scrambled for cell signal and called search and rescue. Rangers arrived 3 hours later using ropes and helicopter support, but Robbie was already unresponsive. Her body was carefully extracted after sunset. The medical examiner determined death resulted from a combination of heat stroke and positional asphyxia. Her wedged position had restricted breathing while extreme temperatures overwhelmed her body's cooling systems. Robbie's funeral in Flagstaff drew over 200 attendees to the school gymnasium. Former students spoke about her passion for desert geology and field science. The National Park Service responded by posting warning signs at unmaintained chimney routes throughout Canyonlands. They launched a pilot program monitoring ambient rock temperatures and advised solo climbers to avoid narrow features after mid-morning during peak heat months. It was March 22, 2018, when a routine construction day in Manhattan's Upper East Side turned into a catastrophic reminder of how quickly industrial accidents can shatter lives. Miguel Santos, 26, had been chasing the American dream for 3 years since immigrating from Guadalajara, Mexico. Standing 5 feet 6 inches with muscular arms earned from manual labor, Miguel possessed infectious optimism, despite the language barrier that sometimes left him nodding along to conversations he only half understood. Living in a cramped Queens apartment with his wife Carmen and 18-month-old daughter Isabella, Miguel worked construction 6 days a week, sending half his paycheck to his elderly parents in Mexico. His limited English made him hesitant to speak up, but his work ethic was legendary on job sites. Miguel had discovered that volunteering for extra duties like social media documentation could earn overtime pay. The construction company required progress footage for their website, and Miguel eagerly volunteered, seeing it as an opportunity to prove his value beyond manual labor. The 47-story luxury residential project on East 79th Street was behind schedule, creating pressure that trickled down to workers like Miguel. Project foreman Rick Castellano, known for cutting corners, had positioned Miguel near the crane's base with instructions to capture dramatic close-up shots of concrete beam lifts. What Miguel didn't know was that Castellano had deliberately placed him inside the crane's exclusion zone, the safety perimeter that should have been off-limits during lifting operations. The foreman wanted impressive footage for clients, and Miguel's eagerness made him perfect for the dangerous assignment. At 2:30 p.m., Miguel stood directly beneath the towering 150-foot crane, phone in hand, filming as operator Antonio Reyes attempted to lift a massive 5-ton concrete beam. The crane, a 20-year-old model working overtime for months, groaned under excessive weight beyond its rated capacity. Miguel's phone captured the critical moment when the overloaded boom began to buckle. The footage showed the exact instant when the weld joint at the boom's base, weakened by metal fatigue from months of overuse, started to crack and fail. The recording continued as the massive steel boom snapped completely, the 150-foot structure beginning its deadly descent directly toward Miguel's position. Despite the chaos above, Miguel remained focused on filming, unaware that death was falling from the sky. The boom struck Miguel with devastating force after its 150-foot fall. He suffered catastrophic crushing injuries to his head and torso, dying instantly from the impact. His phone continued recording for several seconds before going black. Antonio survived in his operator's cab but suffered severe psychological trauma. The experienced crane operator, who had repeatedly warned management about the equipment's deteriorating condition, quit construction work entirely. The first 8 seconds of Miguel's phone footage were recovered from the damaged memory card. The partial recording provided crucial evidence of the overloading and structural failure that led to the tragedy. City inspectors used Miguel's final footage to identify multiple safety violations, including deliberate placement of workers inside exclusion zones and equipment use beyond rated capacity. The investigation revealed a pattern of ignored safety shortcuts. Miguel's family received a substantial settlement that secured Isabella's education and allowed Carmen to stay home. Enhanced exclusion zones and stricter crane safety enforcement were implemented citywide. Miguel's final documentation had exposed the deadly consequences of prioritizing profits over worker safety, ensuring his sacrifice would protect future construction workers reaching for their own American dreams. It was July 21, 2018. Morning light scattered across Zion like it had been poured, slow and golden, over the jagged cliffs. The sky, still pale with the breath of dawn, stretched wide and empty above Kolob Terrace Road. Down below, at a turnout where the pavement crumbled into desert dust, a hatchback idled in silence. 2 brothers, Nathan and Jude Merriman, stood beside it, strapping on helmets, buckling harnesses, tightening laces. Nathan snapped a photo of the view, the kind you only take at the start of something unforgettable. The GoPro on Jude's helmet was already recording. Later, after salvaging what was left of the corrupt footage, searchers would pause it frame by frame. The exact moment Jude turns to say something, maybe a joke, just before the noise begins, before the camera catches the first impossible movement of the canyon turning against them. They were young, hungry for adventure. Jude, 22, was the anchor, a mechanical engineering student at UT Austin with spreadsheets for packing lists, backup GPS files, and laminated topographic maps. Nathan, 19, was the dreamer, curious, restless, drawn to the natural world with a heart full of reverence and a hint of recklessness. He studied environmental science and believed the Earth could teach him more than any textbook. They had named the trip the 10-part gauntlet, a pact made on dorm room floors and summer night drives. 3 weeks, 10 national parks, thousands of miles. Zion was the last, the prize, and Shadow Spine was the final descent. Unofficial, unmarked, and whispered about only on niche internet forums, Shadow Spine was an outlaw route, raw, remote, and completely unregulated. Its entrance was hidden behind a rock fall and a stand of twisted junipers. Few had seen it. Fewer had finished it. For Jude and Nathan, that made it perfect. They were halfway into the descent by 9:40 a.m. Already, the world above had disappeared. The slot narrowed around them like a throat. In some places, the walls stood just 3 feet apart. Sunlight came in thin slices and the air was cool and damp, carrying the earthy perfume of algae, sand, and stone. Their voices echoed strangely, faint, delayed. Jude moved first, rope in hand, anchoring gear with practiced efficiency. Nathan followed, calling out each time his feet touched down. They passed rappels with a kind of grace, bouncing gently, twisting midair, laughing when the rope spun too fast. The footage would show them dancing, almost. The canyon felt alive, and they were in rhythm with it, until they weren't. A single drop of water landed on Nathan's helmet. He wiped it without thinking. Jude glanced up briefly and brushed it off as just a probable runoff. He didn't check again. The sound came suddenly. First, a whisper, almost too faint to notice, like wind moving through a pine forest. Then, a hiss. Then, a roar. They stopped moving. They asked each other to confirm what they're hearing. They listened, silence, then again, louder. The canyon gave no warnings, no vantage point, no exit path. The brothers turned to face the sound, but the canyon twisted, its echoes impossible to trace. Then, around the corner behind them, a brown surge appeared, a flash flood. 6 inches of water can knock a person down. In slot canyons, those inches multiply into torrents, 10 feet tall and filled with stone, limbs, rage. Jude reached for the rope. Nathan turned upward, his hands grasping at vertical sandstones slick with algae. The flood arrived. The GoPro caught the first impact, a violent lurch, a scream, a blur of water, rock, and movement. A hand, then nothing. The last frame, brown chaos, bubbling and swirling, where 2 people had stood seconds earlier. It took search and rescue teams almost a full day to locate their car. Inside, topo maps on the dashboard, granola wrappers in the back, a GPS trail leading straight into Shadow Spine. Rangers and volunteers moved slowly. The canyon was still releasing water, residual flow from upstream storms no one had seen. At the 3rd rappel, they found a knotted rope tangled around a boulder, soaked and frayed. Farther down, a boot lodged between rocks, a helmet, cracked. 3 days later, after the initial search, Nathan's body surfaced 5 miles downstream, tangled in branches near North Creek. Jude was found 2 days later, wedged under a collapsed log jam, his harness still clipped in. Their story spread fast. Canyoneering forums lit up with tributes and warnings. Posts detailed the dangers of unlisted routes and the deceptive calm before summer floods. Park officials added bold new signage and began issuing monsoon alerts with revised language and stark images. Shadow Spine disappeared from most online maps, but it was still there. The canyon does not remember, but the community does. And when the GoPro footage is shown in training sessions or safety briefings, instructors pause just before the roar, a final echo, suspended in time. Then they press play. It was August 11th, 2021. The sun had only just grazed the jagged peaks of Wyoming's Wind River Range, casting long, crooked shadows across the alpine basin. Light moved slowly here, caught between stone and sky. Lane Tucker stood alone in the morning chill, her breath curling like smoke into the thin air. 31 years old, a trauma nurse from Missoula, she had long since learned how to find calm in chaos. Now, she stood wrapped in fleece and silence, her backpack snug against her spine, her eyes fixed on the day's route, the Titcomb Basin Traverse. To most, the route was a warning, remote, brutal, unforgiving. To Lane, it was a promise. She had mapped this trail in her dreams for years. Her gear was packed with surgical precision. Rope, first aid kit, emergency beacon, freeze-dried meals, a GPS unit with fresh batteries. She wasn't impulsive. Lane didn't chase danger. She moved toward it with the deliberation of a surgeon making a single incision. This wasn't about thrill or conquest. It was about quiet, the kind that hummed beneath the wind, the kind only the mountains could offer. She moved like she belonged there. The high-altitude solitude suited her better than city noise. Friends often joked she was part mountain goat, born with lungs tuned for elevation and a heart calibrated for stillness. Lane just smiled. How could they know what silence really sounded like at 11,000 feet? She had seen the mountains turn too. Years ago, on an early season solo in the Bitterroots, a patch of crusted snow had collapsed beneath her. She fell 10 feet before slamming into a rock outcrop, her ribs bruised and breath knocked out. It took her 6 hours to limp back to the trailhead, every step lit by a failing headlamp. She never told her parents, but she remembered the lesson. Nature doesn't issue warnings twice. Still, she came back again and again, not out of defiance but reverence. The wild had rules. Lane respected them. The snowpack had lingered that year. Rangers had posted warnings. Unstable slopes, hidden crevasses, unpredictable meltwater crossings. Lane had studied the maps again and again, adjusting her route to avoid the worst of it. That meant leaving the main trail behind and passing through a narrow granite chute, barely marked on topographic charts. That was the last choice she ever made. At 1:14 p.m., her GPS sent its final ping, 3 miles off the designated route, beside a remote boulder field sliced by a steep, rock-filled funnel. The ping was passive, just a location log. No SOS was ever sent. If she'd had time, she would have called for help. There was no storm, no animal activity. The skies were wide open, but the chute was treacherous, a labyrinth of loose slabs and shadowed cracks, some deep enough to lose a body forever. 3 days later, when Lane failed to return, the alarm was raised. Search and rescue teams traced her last known coordinates. Reaching the area took hours. The chute loomed like a collapsed cathedral, walls of broken granite whispering with wind. It wasn't just dangerous, it felt indifferent. Near the entrance to the rock funnel, her backpack was found, upright, torn, as though it had been yanked free by something sudden. Its straps were frayed, as if it had snagged during a fall and been yanked downward before wedging itself upright between the rocks. Her rope was still coiled, her satellite phone unbroken, her food untouched. There were no bloodstains, no note, just absence. Further down the chute, the terrain narrowed sharply, 20, maybe 30 feet into a dark slit, barely shoulder wide. One rescuer lay flat, belly to the ground, and peered in with a headlamp. The light was swallowed whole. The rocks closed in like jaws. They couldn't safely descend. Trying to widen the gap risked a collapse. The mountain had made its choice. The theory that emerged was a quiet one. Lane had attempted a crossing when the rock beneath her gave way. A slip, a miscalculation, one moment of imbalance. She may have twisted midair, landed at the wrong angle, and fallen. Not far, but far enough. In the weeks that followed, helicopters circled above. Drones scanned the crevasse. Nothing surfaced. Nothing moved. The mountain gave nothing back. Even climbers with ropes and nerves of steel returned, shaking their heads. The slot canyon had become a mouth that wouldn't open. Her parents came once. They didn't go up the trail. They stood at the trailhead, gazing into the range, listening. Her mother said the silence there sounded like her daughter, resolute, unreachable. They left a cairn. A note in a plastic bag weighted with a stone. Then they drove away. Lane Tucker's disappearance didn't become legend exactly, but it unsettled people. It stayed, maybe because she knew the risks, maybe because she didn't tempt fate, but still fell to it, maybe because she moved with care, with reverence, and was taken anyway. There are no villains in this story, no clear ending, just a narrow chute, a torn pack, and silence so loud it echoes. It was February 25th, 1988, when the Calgary Winter Olympics, a celebration of athletic prowess amid icy peaks and crisp alpine air, was interrupted by a sudden and harrowing incident. On the slopes where the men's giant slalom event was underway, Dr. Jörg Oberhammer, a highly respected orthopedic specialist for the Austrian ski team, was navigating the mountain between competition runs. Known for his unwavering dedication to athlete care and his deep knowledge of sports medicine, Oberhammer had long been a trusted figure behind the scenes. But that day, a routine moment on the snow would take an unexpected and devastating turn, casting a pall over the spirit of the Games. On February 25, 1988, the serene beauty of the snow-covered slopes was shattered by a devastating accident. As the men's giant slalom event unfolded, Oberhammer, who was navigating the mountain between runs, collided with another skier. The impact sent him tumbling beneath a snow grooming machine, a tragic twist of fate that would claim his life. The accident cast a pall over the Games, a somber reminder of the inherent dangers faced by those who dedicate their lives to winter sports. The incident was witnessed by Swiss skiers Permin Zurbriggen and Martin Hangel, who were ascending the mountain on a chairlift at the time. The sight of their colleague and friend caught in such a tragic accident left a profound impact on them and the entire Olympic community. The loss of Dr. Oberhammer was felt deeply, a stark reminder of the unpredictable forces of nature that athletes and support staff alike must contend with in the pursuit of excellence. Dr. Oberhammer's death was not just a personal tragedy, but a moment of collective mourning for the Olympic family. His contributions to the sport were significant, having treated many of the top athletes in the skiing world. His expertise and care had helped countless competitors achieve their dreams, and his absence was keenly felt by all who knew him. The incident underscored the critical importance of safety measures and vigilance in the high-stakes environment of the Winter Olympics. In the wake of the tragedy, the Olympic community came together to honor Dr. Oberhammer's memory. Tributes poured in from around the world, celebrating his dedication to the sport and the athletes he served. His legacy was one of compassion, skill, and an unwavering commitment to the well-being of those under his care. As the Games continued, his spirit was remembered in the hearts of those who knew him, a guiding light in a time of darkness. The loss of Dr. Oberhammer also served as a catalyst for renewed discussions on safety protocols in winter sports. The incident highlighted the need for comprehensive risk management strategies to protect athletes and support staff from the unpredictable dangers of the mountain environment. As the Olympic community reflected on the tragedy, there was a collective resolve to ensure that such incidents would be prevented in the future, safeguarding the spirit of the Games and the lives of those who participate. As we remember Dr. Georg Oberhammer, we are reminded of the delicate balance between the pursuit of greatness and the risks inherent in that journey. His story is a testament to the courage and dedication of those who work behind the scenes, supporting athletes in their quest for excellence. His legacy lives on in the hearts of those he touched, a symbol of the enduring spirit of the Winter Olympics and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of adversity. In honoring Dr. Oberhammer, we celebrate not only his contributions to the sport, but also the values he embodied: compassion, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. His story serves as a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made by those who support the athletes, ensuring that the Olympic flame continues to burn brightly, a beacon of hope and unity for all who dare to dream. It was January 15, 2023. A clear winter day in Nepal as Yeti Airlines Flight 691 prepared for its 27-minute journey from Kathmandu to Pokhara. Among the 72 passengers and crew on board was 25-year-old Sonu Jaiswal, a father of 3 from Ghazipur, India, who was traveling with 3 friends on a trip that was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. The 4 friends, Jaiswal, Abhishek Kushwaha, Anil Rajbar, and Vishal Sharma, had left India on January 13th to visit Nepal's sacred Pashupatinath temple. Jaiswal, a small liquor store owner, had gone to pray for a son, as he already had 3 daughters. After their spiritual pilgrimage, the group headed to Pokhara for sightseeing and paragliding in the shadow of the majestic Annapurna mountain range. As Flight 691 approached Pokhara International Airport, Jaiswal did what millions of travelers do every day. He began recording the experience to share with friends and family back home. He started a Facebook live stream capturing the ATR 72-500 aircraft's descent through his window seat. The 90-second video began innocuously enough. Through the window, viewers could see buildings and green fields as the plane approached the runway. The atmosphere inside the cabin was relaxed. Passengers were chatting and laughing, completely unaware of the horror that would unfold in mere seconds. Jaiswal turned the camera toward himself, smiling in his yellow sweater, then panned to show his fellow passengers. There were no warning signs, no announcements from the cockpit, nothing to indicate that anything was amiss. The plane appeared to be making a routine landing approach. Then, without warning, the aircraft suddenly veered sharply to the left. The camera briefly captured the panicked cries of passengers as they realized something was terribly wrong. Within seconds, the footage became chaotic, the phone shaking violently as the plane lost control. The video recorded the bone-chilling sound of an engine screeching, followed by the sight of flames engulfing the frame, and then nothing. Flight 691 crashed into a gorge near the newly opened Pokhara International Airport, killing all 72 people on board. It was Nepal's deadliest aviation disaster in 30 years. In Ghazipur, nearly 270 miles from the crash site, News of the accident reached Jaiswal's family almost immediately, as television channels began broadcasting images of the wreckage, the mangled fuselage still burning and billowing thick gray smoke. "We couldn't believe the news until we saw the video," said Jaiswal's brother Deepak, who was among the first family members to view the live stream that had since gone viral. "It was painful." The video provided a chilling first-person perspective of the disaster's final moments. Aviation experts later determined that the aircraft had stalled during its approach, possibly due to pilot error or mechanical failure. The plane's black box revealed that the pilot had asked for a change in runway just minutes before the crash. What made the tragedy even more poignant was the involvement of co-pilot Anju Katiwada, who had pursued years of pilot training after her husband died in a 2006 plane crash while flying for the same airline. In a cruel twist of fate, both husband and wife met the same end, 16 years apart. For the families of the victims, including Jaiswal's wife and 3 young daughters, the video was both a blessing and a curse, a final glimpse of their loved ones, but also an unbearable documentation of their final terrifying moments. Jaiswal's father traveled to Kathmandu to identify and retrieve his son's body. "He was not just my brother," Deepak Jaiswal said. "I have lost a friend in him." The tragedy of Sonu Jaiswal highlights the fragility of life and how quickly ordinary moments can turn catastrophic. His live stream, intended to share joy with loved ones, instead became a grim historical document, one of the few instances where the final moments before a plane crash were captured from inside the doomed aircraft. It was March 22, 2017. Dry morning air drifted through the limestone spires of El Potrero Chico as the sun lit up the canyon walls. A faint breeze stirred the trees below as the towering chimney above loomed silent and untouched. No one had dared it in over a year. A climb that day, carefully prepared and mapped out, would slowly devolve into a deadly entrapment in stone. James McKenna, a 38-year-old general contractor from New Orleans, stood at the base of La Boca del Diablo, adjusting his custom gear rack one final time. He was known in niche climbing forums for his obsessive approach to wide cracks and squeezed chimneys across North America. This trip to northern Mexico had been months in planning, targeting the route's infamous fifth pitch, an 80-foot squeeze chimney so tight that even average-sized climbers struggled to pass through. James had traveled with Roberto Salinas, a Monterrey local and occasional partner, specifically for this challenge. They started early, beginning their climb at 9 o'clock a.m. James led the first 3 pitches smoothly, though the wide sections taxed him heavily. By pitch 4, his shirt clung to his back, streaked with blood from torn knuckles. His breathing had become labored, but when Roberto suggested switching leads, James declined. He had come for the chimney. At the base of pitch 5, Roberto reminded him of the handful of known incidents involving body entrapment in that section. James only nodded, triple-checking his rack, which included several oversized cams and slings he had sewn himself. The chimney loomed above them, dark and irregular, wide at the base but tapering in strange angles toward the top. About 20 feet into the squeeze, James's shoulders wedged sideways, chest pressed between 2 flaring plates of stone. He got stuck and yelled down to Roberto. He tried desperately to shift, exhale, rotate. Nothing worked. Roberto lowered a sling immediately, but James couldn't lift his arms to reach it. 10 agonizing minutes passed as his partner watched helplessly from below. James's voice gradually faded as the stone compressed his chest, making each breath more difficult than the last. Roberto tried everything from his position below, yelling for help and making an emergency call once he realized James had gone silent. A rescue team arrived 4 hours later, delayed by the rugged terrain and the lack of established trails leading to the base of the formation. It took 2 additional hours and specialized equipment, wedges, air bladders, and a cordless angle grinder, to open the stone wide enough to extract James's body. He had died of compressive asphyxia, crushed by the very rock he had traveled so far to conquer. James was returned to New Orleans, where a small funeral was held. His family buried him with a length of climbing rope, one of his handmade cam slings, and a battered route journal filled with hand-drawn topos. Mexican climbing authorities and local guides collaborated to update the route description. The fifth pitch of La Boca del Diablo was officially marked as high risk, no solo leads, with warnings posted at the base. It was August 12, 2016, when 24-year-old Kevin Park made a decision that would forever change how Arizona's slot canyons are monitored. Kevin was a recent college graduate from Portland, Oregon, working part-time at a camera store while building his photography portfolio. Standing 5 feet 8 inches with messy brown hair, Kevin possessed the restless energy of someone determined to make his mark. His personality mixed ambition with inexperience. Kevin had discovered slot canyon photography just 6 months earlier, after seeing stunning images online. The narrow, sculpted passages captivated his imagination, though he remained a novice hiker with only 3 previous canyon explorations in safer areas. Kevin was staying at a rundown Page, Arizona motel, surviving on a $200 budget for his week-long photography vacation. His beat-up Honda Civic contained basic discount hiking gear, and his most valuable possession was a mid-range DSLR camera he'd saved months to afford. At 1:30 p.m., Kevin began live streaming to his modest YouTube channel of 150 subscribers. His channel, Kevin's Canyon Quest, documented his journey from amateur to professional photographer. He was particularly excited about this narrow, technical slot canyon exploration. The Antelope Canyon area was experiencing typical August weather, with afternoon thunderstorms building over distant mesas. Kevin, focused on photography and eager to impress his online audience, failed to recognize the significance of darkening clouds 15 miles away. At exactly 2:45 p.m., while Kevin crouched in a narrow canyon section adjusting camera settings and narrating to viewers, rushing water echoed off canyon walls. Within seconds, a 6-foot wall of muddy water and debris traveling at 20 miles per hour rounded the bend ahead. Kevin's live stream captured everything. His voice shifted from excitement to panic as he realized his situation. The smooth, sculpted walls offered no handholds or escape routes. Kevin attempted to climb, his sneakers slipping against polished sandstone as water rose around his legs. The torrent swept Kevin 200 yards downstream in 30 seconds. His phone recorded the chaotic tumble through churning brown water filled with rocks and debris. The final moment showed Kevin's head striking a large boulder before the phone submerged, ending the broadcast. Kevin suffered a severe skull fracture and drowned in turbulent floodwater. His body became wedged between rocks as the flood continued through the canyon system. Search and rescue teams, alerted by concerned viewers who witnessed the live stream, found Kevin's body 12 hours later when the water receded. The recovery required specialized equipment and experienced canyon rescue personnel. Kevin's tragic death sparked significant safety changes. Authorities installed improved warning signs about flash flood dangers at canyon entrances, enhanced weather monitoring systems for slot canyon areas, and developed better communication protocols between meteorologists and park services. His story serves as a sobering reminder that nature's beauty often masks deadly dangers, and that experience, preparation, and respect for natural forces can mean the difference between capturing the perfect shot and becoming another cautionary tale carved into the desert's unforgiving landscape. It was December 27, 2003. Jeremy Wallace cinched his pack with frostbitten fingers and looked out across the white void. Somewhere beneath him, buried beneath wind-shattered pine boughs and a sagging tarp, his family waited. The cold was eating everything now. The snow, once powdery and soft, had turned to a hard crust. In the distance, the Bitterroot Mountains rose like sleeping giants. Jeremy knew what the silence meant. The storm was settling in. He had hours, maybe less. He didn't cry, didn't shout. He just pulled his coat tighter, gritted his teeth, and stepped into the wind. It hadn't started this way. Jeremy had always been a man who believed in preparation. A decorated Army Ranger, survival instructor, and wilderness purist, he'd spent years mastering the unforgiving corners of the American backcountry. Cold didn't scare him. Hunger didn't shake him. Weakness, though, that did. Weakness was a virus, and he believed the cure was learned under duress, beside firelight and beneath open sky. Back in Missoula, Montana, Jeremy taught survivalism like scripture. He ran courses on firecraft, snow sheltering, and high-altitude navigation. His students called him the captain. His philosophy: nature was the ultimate teacher, screens lied, comfort dulled. He would raise his children with dirt on their hands and wind in their lungs. Dana, his wife, had once been a nurse. Quiet, practical. She didn't always agree with Jeremy's extremes, but she believed in his heart. She trusted him. Tyler, 12, was just like his father, brave, stubborn, wide-eyed. Maddie, 9, loved drawing the prints of wolves and elk they found in the snow. She hated the cold, but never said so out loud. The trip was meant to be their final challenge of the year. No GPS, no phone, no backup plan. Just 5 days in the snowbound wilderness, living off what they brought in and what they built themselves. Jeremy called it going primitive. He believed it would bond them forever. And for a time, it did. Their first 2 days in the Bitterroots shimmered like memories in a snow globe. Tyler and Maddie threw snowballs and traced animal tracks through the trees. Dana brewed oatmeal over a fire that snapped and hissed. Their shelter, made from pine poles, plastic sheeting and snow walls, held strong. At night, they huddled together inside wool-lined sleeping bags while the wind whispered above the treetops. Jeremy smiled into the darkness, certain he'd gotten it right. Then the storm came. It wasn't sudden, it crept, a whisper that grew into a scream. By the third night, the sky collapsed, dropping wet, heavy snow in endless sheets. The temperature plummeted by 30 degrees in hours. Wind tore through the trees like a living thing. It ripped one of the firs down onto their shelter, cracking a support beam and punching a hole in the plastic. The fire sputtered and died. Their last dry wood soaked through, their clothes turned stiff. Jeremy tried to fix it. Dana's fingers wouldn't stop shaking. Maddie wouldn't open her eyes. Tyler stayed silent. The last thing they ate was a scoop of barely warm oatmeal Jeremy cooked over embers, then divided 4 ways. By dawn, he knew what he had to do. The ranger station near Elk City was less than 10 miles away, he estimated. Not a trail, but a straight line through a narrow drainage and up over a pass. He packed light. 1 bar, a canteen, a hand-drawn map. He kissed Dana's forehead, tucked the children beneath layered pine boughs, and pulled the tarp tight over the shelter's breach. He told them he'd be back before sunset. He never made it beyond 6 miles. Search teams found his body 2 days later, curled like a question mark beside a fallen log, 1 glove missing, his face half covered in snow. The duct tape on his boots had peeled, his footprints wandered. They circled once, twice, then veered away, lost. In his pack, they found a note scribbled in pencil, "Keep going, don't wait." The family was found less than 24 hours after that. Their shelter was buried beneath wind-packed snow. It took nearly an hour of digging to expose the crumpled tarp. Underneath, Dana's face was turned toward the opening, her eyes closed. Her arms wrapped around both children. Tyler's hands were still clasped around his sister. Maddie's hair had frozen in thin strands of ice. They had died the night before, hours before rescue arrived. The media storm that followed was brief and violent. Some called Jeremy a hero, others called him reckless. TV hosts debated the ethics of bringing children into the wild in winter. Message boards lit up. Outdoor magazines ran exposés. But none of it changed what mattered. The mountains hadn't judged. They hadn't cared. The Bitterroots had simply done what they always do. Waited, watched, and buried. There's a trail now that cuts through the gulch above Elk City, just past the Third Creek crossing where the wind presses low and cold through the trees. Some hikers pause there. A few leave tokens, a glove, a pine cone, a folded scrap of tarp, and some, after a long silence, turn back. It was October 1st, 1995, a crisp autumn day at Niagara Falls where thousands of tourists gathered to witness the breathtaking cascade of water thundering down the 167-foot drop. Among the crowd stood 39-year-old Robert Overacker, a stunt school graduate from Camarillo, California, whose heart raced with anticipation. After 7 years of planning, today would be the day he'd attempt something extraordinary. Jet skiing over the edge of Horseshoe Falls with a rocket-propelled parachute strapped to his back. This wasn't just about thrill-seeking. Overacker had a message. The jet ski he'd ride bore a sign reading, "Save the Homeless," a cause he genuinely cared about. His brother Michael Zurich and friend Christopher Yeoman stood ready with cameras to document what they believed would be a spectacular success. Footage that would draw attention to the plight of those living on the streets. What the onlookers didn't know was that they were about to witness a man's final moments on Earth. At 12:35 p.m., Overacker entered the Niagara River near the Canadian Niagara Power Plant. The jet ski's engine roared as he accelerated toward the massive waterfall, navigating the rapids with surprising skill. His confidence was evident. He'd prepared for this moment for years, twice before traveling to the falls, only to be talked out of the stunt by concerned friends. As he approached the brink, tourists raised their cameras. German visitor Manfred Baldus captured the fateful moment on video. Overacker speeding towards certain danger, determination written across his face. The jet ski reached the edge and Overacker let go, raising his arms triumphantly as he began the plunge. This was the moment when his rocket-propelled parachute was supposed to deploy, carrying him safely to the churning waters below. But something went terribly wrong. The parachute failed to open. Some reports later suggested it wasn't properly attached to his body, a fatal oversight in equipment preparation. For 5.6 seconds, Overacker fell through the air, perhaps realizing in those final moments that his safety system had failed him. He struck the water at the base of the falls with devastating force. As Parks Police dispatcher Tom Dettenbeck would later explain, "When you're hitting water, it's like hitting cement at that height." Initially, some witnesses thought they saw Overacker swimming in the turbulent waters below. This gave momentary hope that he might have somehow survived. In reality, what they observed was likely his body being violently tossed by the powerful rapids, a cruel illusion of life, where there was none. Staff from the Maid of the Mist tour boat recovered Overacker's body from the water. Despite desperate attempts to revive him, he was pronounced dead at Niagara General Hospital an hour after his plunge. Overacker became the 15th person since 1901 to intentionally go over Niagara Falls in or on a device, and the 5th to die in the attempt. He left behind his wife, Lori, and a community shocked by his passing. The tragedy of Robert Overacker serves as a grim reminder of how quickly adventure can turn to disaster. His death wasn't the last at the falls. 6 more people have intentionally gone over since 1995, with 2 losing their lives. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of Overacker's story is the footage that captured his final moments. Arms raised in what looked like triumph, unaware that he was seconds away from eternity, all in pursuit of a stunt that was meant to help others but instead left his loved ones in mourning. Pavel Kashin. It was October 1st, 2016. The sun dipped low behind the Selkirk Mountains, casting long shadows across the forested slopes. Dry leaves rustled faintly as evening settled over a limestone crag known to climbers as the Bowl. The day had promised nothing but success, clear skies, clean data, and an easy descent, until a single misstep turned it into a tragedy etched into climbing circles for years to come. Ellie Thomason, a 26-year-old graduate forestry student at Thompson Rivers University, stood at the base of her project route adjusting her harness one final time. Her weekdays were spent measuring plots and mapping regeneration sites for her thesis on post-fire tree density and high-elevation ecosystems. But evenings belonged to climbing. Her partner, Theo Spencer, was a fellow student and her climbing companion of 3 years. The two shared a love for the quiet remoteness of inland British Columbia, where undeveloped crags like the Bowl offered privacy, steep limestone, and long uninterrupted routes. They'd hiked in that morning for field sampling and decided to cap off the day with a few routes before nightfall. Ellie geared up for an overhanging sport line she had been projecting the month before. The sun had already slipped below the ridge, and shadows filled the alcove as she worked her way up the steep face. Animal prints had been visible in the dust near their packs, large, round, without claw marks. Theo had remarked they were probably fox or lynx tracks. Neither considered the possibility of something larger. They carried no weapons, no bear spray. At approximately 6:40 p.m., Ellie clipped into the second-to-last bolt, her movements fluid and confident on the familiar holds. Theo stood 20 feet below managing the rope when he suddenly heard sharp rustling behind him. Turning, he caught a flash of tan muscle. A cougar, mid-sprint, bounding toward the base of the climb. The predator leapt upward with terrifying agility, claws scraping against limestone as it latched onto Ellie's left leg. She screamed once, high, startled, terrified. Her grip slipped as the animal pulled down with its full weight. She came off the wall and crashed onto rocks below, the cougar landing on top of her. The attack was swift and savage. The cougar launched from the brush like a snapped cable, its forelimbs clamping around her shoulders as its jaws locked onto her neck. She barely had time to scream before the weight of the animal drove her to the ground. Theo dropped the rope and sprinted forward, hurling rocks and shouting, but the cougar was already tearing into her torso with hooked claws, raking through fleece and flesh. He slammed it with a jagged stone the size of a helmet, striking just behind the ear. With a low snarl, it released and vanished into the tree line. Ellie lay unconscious on the limestone, her throat torn open, blood pooling beneath her. Theo applied pressure frantically and called emergency services, but it was already too late. She bled out in less than 5 minutes as he held her. Authorities reached the remote site around 9 p.m., confirming fatal injuries from both the fall and mauling. Wildlife officers later tracked the cougar using scat and prints, discovering it was a severely underweight adult male driven into lower elevations by prolonged drought and prey scarcity. The animal was euthanized 2 days later. Ellie's funeral was held 6 days later in Kamloops, attended by classmates, professors, and members of the local climbing community. Her casket was closed. In the weeks following, provincial wildlife authorities increased patrols around the bowl and temporarily restricted climbing access. Thompson Rivers University issued a formal statement urging safety for student researchers working in remote areas. It was November 18, 2014, when the third shift at Midwest Chemical Processing Plant in Detroit became a nightmare that would forever change industrial safety protocols. James Thompson, 45, had been the backbone of the night maintenance crew for 12 years. A quiet, methodical man standing 5 feet 8 inches with calloused hands and graying temples, he carried the weight of responsibility both at work and at home. Divorced 3 years prior, James lived alone in a cramped apartment on Detroit's east side, working double shifts to meet child support obligations for his 2 teenagers, Sarah and Michael. His co-workers knew James as the guy who never missed a shift and always followed procedures. What they didn't know was that beneath his reserved exterior, James harbored growing concerns about the plant's aging infrastructure. He'd noticed corroded fittings and pressure irregularities, but management seemed more interested in production quotas than safety reports. That's when his 17-year-old son, Michael, a tech-savvy high school senior, set up a cloud backup system on his father's smartphone, teaching him how to record and automatically upload videos as evidence of safety violations. For 3 weeks, James had been quietly documenting his concerns. Short clips of leaking valves and corroded pipes are automatically uploaded to cloud storage, creating an inadvertent digital diary of industrial negligence. The night shift on November 18th started normally. James clocked in at 11 p.m. and began his rounds. Near Tank 7, pressure readings were climbing beyond normal parameters, and the emergency release valve showed severe corrosion. At 11:47 p.m., James pulled out his phone and began recording, narrating his observations. The live stream captured his methodical approach as he attempted to manually release the dangerous pressure buildup, describing the corroded fitting that had been flagged but never addressed. What happened next unfolded in terrifying slow motion. The corroded fitting failed catastrophically. The tank ruptured with explosive force, releasing a massive vapor cloud. Within seconds, the cloud found an ignition source from a nearby electrical panel, creating a fireball that engulfed the entire section. The live stream continued for 8 more seconds, recording the initial blast before connection was lost. James suffered burns over 95% of his body, his respiratory system destroyed by superheated gases. He died within 30 seconds, a victim of the very hazards he'd been documenting. The explosion shook buildings 2 miles away, bringing fire departments racing to the scene. The plant's evacuation procedures prevented additional casualties. Michael accessed his father's cloud storage, discovering the automatically uploaded footage that captured the exact moment of disaster. The video became crucial evidence for OSHA investigators, revealing the precise sequence of equipment failures and management negligence. The wrongful death lawsuit resulted in a multi-million-dollar settlement and sweeping safety changes. James Thompson's final documentation had exposed systemic failures endangering countless workers. Today, the plant operates under new safety standards requiring digital documentation with automatic cloud backup. James's legacy lives on in every safety report uploaded, ensuring no workers' concerns are ignored. It was October 14, 2016. The tropical sun was dipping below the hills of Maui's east coast, casting a golden glow across the lush rainforest, its beams fighting the encroaching shadows. A silver rental car sat parked beneath a canopy of thick ferns and towering ohia trees. Inside the car, 2 backpacks lay discarded, half-finished water bottles in their side pockets, a printed map marked with a red X. Just beyond, a narrow path wound into the dense underbrush. Invisible to the casual observer, it led to a place where the earth kept its secrets. Elias and Morgan Finch, newlyweds from Flagstaff, Arizona, stood at the edge of adventure. Both 28, they shared a love for the unknown, for the places beneath the surface. They were geologists by trade, cavers by passion. They had met 4 years earlier on a field expedition to Kartchner Caverns in southern Arizona, a place where the world's most beautiful underground formations were just waiting to be explored. Since then, their vacations had never been to resorts or beaches, but always to caves, lava tubes, or forgotten tunnels where few had ever set foot. This trip was supposed to be their perfect honeymoon, a blend of relaxation by the ocean and the thrill of discovery. Morgan had always adored the sea, but Elias was drawn to the volcanoes, to the primal force beneath the islands. When he learned of the hidden lava tubes near Hana, the pull was irresistible. A GPS coordinate posted on a caving forum, a secret side tunnel off the main lava system, called to him like a siren song, unmapped, little known and deemed unsafe by some. For Elias, this only fueled his excitement. He had a knack for finding the places that others avoided. The couple had packed meticulously: batteries, backup lights, ropes, snacks. Morgan checked the weather one last time. Clear skies, calm winds. They arrived at the cave entrance by 2 p.m., excited but cautious. The main tube was tucked behind a curtain of ferns, its jagged mouth swallowing the daylight as they ventured inside. The temperature dropped immediately, the damp rainforest air giving way to the dry stillness of basalt rock. Their headlamps lit the rough walls, smooth and glassy from centuries of lava flow. They moved deeper into the tube, following the main corridor. But then Elias spotted it, a narrow opening to the right. The GPS pin was a match, a small doorway barely wide enough to fit through, half hidden by fallen rock. Elias whispered that he thinks they've found it, his voice soft but sure, as he pointed toward the narrow opening. Morgan's eyes lit up with anticipation as she smiled and urged him to lead the way. They squeezed through, the passage narrowing further. The air grew stale, the tunnel tight and claustrophobic. This part was untouched. No graffiti, no footprints. A hidden world of silence. When they entered a small chamber about the size of a garage, Morgan paused. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of Elias standing beneath the ceiling, his headlamp casting shadows on the black rock that hung like frozen waves above them. The timestamp, 3:17 p.m. 14 minutes later, everything changed. It began with a low, rumbling tremor, a subtle vibration that rippled through the walls. Dust stirred on the floor. Elias froze, his heart racing. Morgan looked up, and then the rock groaned. Lava tubes were beautiful but fragile. The structure beneath them was old, eroded by centuries of pressure, unseen forces pushing at it from every direction. The tremor that had barely registered to the outside world was enough to set off a chain reaction within the chamber. First came the pebbles, then a basketball-sized chunk of rock crashing to the floor just feet away from where they stood. Morgan screamed, telling Elias to get out of there, but it was already too late. Elias reached for her, but the ceiling above them was giving way. The rock didn't explode. It imploded, as if the cave itself was exhaling. Tons of stone fell in an instant, sealing them in. The light from their headlamps flickered, and then went dark. The world became a tomb of suffocating dust and silence. Hours passed. No one knew they were missing. It wasn't until 3 days later, on October 17th, when a park ranger saw the rental car still parked at the trailhead. The doors were locked. The map inside was marked with the red X, their last known location. A search team was dispatched. Equipped with ropes and helmets, they ventured into the main lava tube, then located the side tunnel. But when they reached the collapse, progress halted. Giant slabs of basalt blocked the passage. It was impossible to move them by hand without risking another collapse. Even so, they checked for any signs of life, looking for small gaps in the debris where air might still flow. They used gas detectors to ensure there was breathable air. The possibility of survivors slim but not impossible. When they reached the spot where the tunnel had once opened, the situation was dire. It was clear that the cave's ceiling had given way in one massive, fatal exhale. The air was thick with dust, and the pressure of the rock above them made everything feel suffocating, like the cave was holding its breath. Engineers were called in. A robot drone, built for tight spaces, was lowered through a crack above the chamber. The camera flickered, jerking through dust and darkness until it found a flash of color, a boot, a backpack, and then beneath a jagged pile of rock, two still bodies side by side, embraced in death. Elias had shielded Morgan, his body curled protectively around hers. Neither had survived the initial collapse. The last photo on Morgan's phone was recovered days later. It captured Elias, grinning beneath the frozen waves of black rock, a moment of joy now stained with eerie finality. It was time-stamped, 3:17 p.m., the last time they had been alive. Their photo, once full of life and laughter, became the haunting image that would live on in the hearts of those who never knew them. Some locals argued that the caves should be sealed, citing the Hawaiian belief in mana, the spiritual energy that flows through the land and its stones. They believed the lava tubes were sacred, home to aqua spirits, whose anger could be stirred by those who ventured too deeply. Others, however, felt that adventurers like Elias and Morgan understood the risks, accepting them as part of their love and respect for the land. To them, exploring the caves was a sacred act, acknowledging the kapu of the earth, honoring both its beauty and danger, and forging a connection with the island's ancient, untamable spirit. To this day, no one has entered that side tunnel again. The opening remains sealed, a forgotten tomb hidden beneath the rainforest. Tourists still drive the Hana Highway, marveling at waterfalls and sea cliffs. Few know how close they are to the place where two adventurers, full of life and love, disappeared beneath the island's ancient skin. It was May 18, 1980, a deceptively calm Sunday morning in southwestern Washington state. The skies were clear, and Mount St. Helens stood majestically against the horizon, its northern face bulging ominously after weeks of seismic activity. For 48-year-old photographer Robert Landsberg, this was the perfect day to document the changing volcano that had captivated his attention for weeks. Landsberg, a freelance photographer from Portland, Oregon, had been meticulously tracking Mount St. Helens. Helens' transformation. He'd visited the mountain repeatedly since March, when the first tremors signaled potential volcanic activity. Each trip yielded stunning images of the growing bulge on the mountain's northern slope, a deformation that was expanding outward at a rate of 5 to 8 feet per day. That morning, Landsberg drove his 1969 Dodge station wagon to a ridge approximately 4 miles from the summit. The location offered a perfect vantage point to capture the volcano's evolution. He set up his tripod, mounted his camera, and prepared to document what he hoped would be another day of gradual changes to the mountain's profile. In his journal the night before, Landsberg had written, "Feel right on the verge of something." His intuition would prove tragically accurate. At 8:32 a.m., a 5.1 magnitude earthquake struck beneath the volcano. Through his viewfinder, Landsberg witnessed the unthinkable. The entire north face of Mount St. Helens began to collapse. What followed was the most destructive volcanic eruption in U.S. history, as the mountain released 24 megatons of thermal energy, equivalent to 1,600 Hiroshima bombs. Landsberg kept photographing. His camera captured the initial lateral blast, the massive ash cloud that rose thousands of feet into the air, and the pyroclastic flow, a deadly mixture of superheated gas, ash, and rock, racing toward him at over 300 miles per hour. As the wall of ash approached, Landsberg made a series of deliberate final actions that reveal extraordinary presence of mind. Knowing he couldn't outrun the blast, he rewound the film back into its canister, placed the camera in his backpack, and then laid his body over the backpack to protect its precious contents. Minutes later, the pyroclastic flow engulfed Landsberg. The superheated ash, reaching temperatures of 800 degrees Fahrenheit, killed him instantly. His body, like 56 others claimed by the eruption that day, became entombed under layers of volcanic debris. For 17 days, Landsberg remained missing. When rescue workers finally discovered his body on June 4th, they found something remarkable. The backpack beneath him had protected his camera and film from the worst of the heat and ash. Though slightly damaged, The film was intact enough to be developed. The photographs recovered from Landsberg's camera provided scientists with invaluable documentation of the eruption's initial stages. His final images show the massive ash cloud growing larger in each frame, approaching his position with terrifying speed. These photos, published in the January 1981 issue of National Geographic, included not just the eruption, but also the scratches, bubbles, warpings, and light leaks caused by heat and ash, the very thumbprint of Holocaust. Landsberg wasn't the only photographer to die that day. Reed Blackburn, a 27-year-old photographer for the Columbian newspaper, was also killed while documenting the eruption from a campsite about 8 miles from the summit. Unlike Landsberg's, Blackburn's film didn't survive the intense heat. USGS volcanologist David Johnston also perished while monitoring the volcano from an observation post 6 miles away. His last words transmitted by radio were, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it," before the signal went dead as the pyroclastic flow engulfed him. What sets Landsberg's story apart is his conscious decision in those final moments. He could have attempted to flee, though it would have been futile. Instead, he chose to secure his work, knowing that his documentation might provide crucial scientific insights. In those last seconds, as death approached at hundreds of miles per hour, he made the ultimate sacrifice for science. The eruption dramatically altered the landscape, reducing Mount St. Helens' height by 1,300 feet and leaving a horseshoe-shaped crater. The blast zone extended for miles, flattening forests and turning lush greenery into a gray moonscape. Robert Landsberg's final act wasn't just that of a photographer committed to his craft. It was a conscious decision to preserve scientific evidence at the cost of his own life. His photographs stand as both his legacy and his final gift to science, images captured literally at the edge of oblivion. It was July 19th, 2018. Storm clouds gathered over the jagged limestone towers of the Dolomites as the wind shifted cold and sharp through the high passes. Light echoed strangely in the canyons below Cima Ovest, while the valley was already falling into shadow. This summit day for Alessandra Bucci would end in a split second of forgotten protocol. Alessandra, a 31-year-old trauma nurse from Parma, stood at the third rappel station adjusting her belay device one final time. With 6 years of recreational climbing experience, she preferred long, moderate, traditional routes and often climbed with her younger brother Lorenzo on weekends. Colleagues described her as focused and methodical, both at work and on the rock. This climb on the south face of Cima Ovest had been planned during a break between hospital rotations, a 2-day trip to reconnect, away from noise and deadlines. The pair had reached the summit just after midday, completing the route with no difficulties. But weather shifted rapidly as clouds moved in from the northwest and temperatures dropped. Rather than down-climbing the descent ridge, they decided to head down using a known retreat route, a set of fixed anchors that led through steep and overhanging sections of the wall. At the third station, Lorenzo began rigging the next rappel while Alessandra prepared her descent. She was cold, quiet, and efficient as always, feeding the rope through her belay device with practiced movements. The routine was so familiar after years of climbing together. Thread the rope, check the anchor, lean back over the ledge. But then, something unexpected happened. Lorenzo heard the sound first, an unmistakable whip of rope cutting through air. When he turned, she was already falling. He watched in horror as she flipped once, then vanished into the mist below. Her scream echoed briefly through the canyon, then was gone. She had not clipped into the anchor before weighting the rope. Without a backup or tether, her system was never secured to the station. The force of her movement pulled the rope free, and gravity claimed the rest. She fell nearly 200 feet to the gully below. Lorenzo stood frozen, then called out desperately, but there was no answer. He descended cautiously in stages, setting anchors and rappelling down through the wind and rain. It took nearly 40 minutes to reach her through the deteriorating conditions. She lay on her side in a runout, helmet cracked, limbs twisted beneath her. The rope was still threaded through her device, untouched by friction. Alpine rescue personnel reached them by helicopter late that evening after being notified by Lorenzo. They declared her dead at the scene. Her injuries were consistent with high-velocity impact. Her harness, rope, and hardware were all intact. The equipment had functioned perfectly. The failure was human. A small funeral was held in Parma. Her colleagues at the hospital sent wildflowers, and her climbing shoes were placed beneath the altar as a final tribute to the nurse who had found peace in the mountains. The Club Alpino Italiano released a public statement emphasizing the importance of redundancy in descent systems and mandatory anchor checks during rappel transitions. The guidebook for Cima Ovest routes was revised to include highlighted rappel safety protocols. It was October 8, 2017, when the unthinkable happened to Frank and Margaret O'Brien in Pine Ridge Community, Northern California. Frank, 67, was a methodical man who had spent 35 years delivering mail through rain and shine. His meticulous nature made him a favorite among residents who could set their clocks by his punctual deliveries. Margaret, 64, possessed the nurturing spirit that made her beloved by countless children during her 20-year tenure, serving lunch at the local elementary school. Her warm smile and extra portions for hungry kids earned her the nickname Grandma Maggie among students. Both lived on modest pensions in their cozy mountain retreat, a small wooden home they had purchased 10 years earlier when rising housing prices forced them from the valley below. The 1,200-square-foot cabin represented their American dream on a budget, complete with a wraparound porch where they spent evenings watching deer graze in their yard. The couple had always been practical about their financial limitations. Their fire safety preparations consisted of basic garden hoses and clearing brush when Frank's arthritis allowed. However, after recent break-ins plagued their neighborhood, Frank had reluctantly invested in a simple 2-camera security system. One camera monitored their front porch, while another watched their living room, both automatically uploading footage to cloud storage every 30 minutes. That fateful afternoon at 3:15 p.m., both cameras were recording when unexpected wind shifts transformed their peaceful Sunday into a nightmare. The exterior camera captured the terrifying speed at which flames consumed their wooden fence and the dry vegetation surrounding their property. Within minutes, their sanctuary became a death trap as embers ignited their roof shingles. The footage revealed Frank's desperate attempt to protect their home, wielding their garden hose against the advancing inferno. His methodical postal worker precision served him even in crisis, as he systematically wet down the house exterior, starting with the most vulnerable areas. However, the thick smoke overwhelmed his aging lungs, and he collapsed near their front steps, still clutching the hose. Meanwhile, the interior camera documented Margaret's frantic efforts to gather their important documents from the living room. Her nurturing instincts kicked in as she tried to save their precious memories, photo albums, and social security paperwork. Tragically, smoke filled the narrow hallway, trapping her inside their bedroom area. The carbon monoxide silently claimed both victims as they succumbed to smoke inhalation and toxic gas exposure. Both cameras continued recording until the flames destroyed the equipment, but their final upload occurred 25 minutes before destruction, preserving the complete timeline of events in haunting detail. Firefighters discovered their bodies 2 days later when the area was declared safe for search and rescue operations. The recovered cloud footage provided investigators with a heartbreaking but complete account of how the rapidly moving fire trapped the elderly couple in their final moments. Their death sparked significant changes in emergency protocols across Northern California. The incident highlighted critical gaps in rural communication systems, leading to improved evacuation notification procedures throughout the region. Frank and Margaret's final moments, preserved by technology Frank had installed for security, became a catalyst for protecting other families from similar tragedies. The O'Brien story serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly nature's fury can overwhelm even the most prepared individuals, and how their legacy continues through the safety improvements their sacrifice inspired. It was October 2nd, 1999. The morning mist clung to the Gauley River like a shroud, swirling just above the surface as if the land itself was holding its breath. The trees were ablaze with autumn's fiery colors, and the river roared, its sound reverberating off the granite cliffs. Near Summersville Dam, rafts were being inflated, helmets tightened, paddles handed out. Among the guides stood Caleb Bishop, a 42-year-old river legend whose presence was as commanding as the water he ruled. Caleb wasn't just a guide, he was the river's master. Before he traded war zones for whitewater, he had been an Army combat diver, trained to survive chaos
to navigate the darkest depths. After leaving the military, he made the Gauley River his home. In 1986, he founded Bishop Expeditions, guiding thousands through the river's treacherous rapids. He knew every bend, every hidden hazard. But the upper Gauley, with its Class 5 rapids and ferocious hydraulics, was a beast even the most seasoned guides approached with respect. This particular morning, Caleb led a group of 4 tourists, 2 couples from Ohio, into the upper Gauley, just after the dam released its daily surge. The river was alive, fast, and powerful. The first few rapids were nothing more than spray and excitement. Caleb's commands were sharp and sure, the raft responding like an extension of his will. For nearly an hour, they navigated with confidence. Then came Pillow Rock. As the raft neared the rapid, Caleb's voice cut through the roar. Lean left. But it was too late. A misjudged stroke, a shift in weight, a small mistake in the chaos of the current was enough to send the raft off balance. The river struck with fury, the raft twisting sideways before flipping completely, spilling all 5 of them into the churning water. The river didn't wait. 2 tourists were immediately sucked downstream, their bodies bouncing off submerged rocks, gasping for air. The others clung to the overturned raft, eyes wide with panic. Caleb surfaced, spitting water, his eyes scanning. He reached for the nearest paddlers, pulling them closer with efficient, practiced hands. He signaled for help, the universal hand signs known only to experienced guides. A safety kayak appeared, pulling the tourists one by one to safety. But Caleb stayed behind. Grabbing the rope line, he wrestled with the raft, trying to flip it upright, knowing every second counted. But the hydraulic at Pillow Rock is a deadly force. The swirling water sucked everything in, trapping anything unfortunate enough to get too close. Caleb, still tethered to the raft, kicked against the current, trying to regain control. Then, just like that, he was gone. There was no splash, no final cry, just a flicker of movement, then nothing. Caleb had disappeared beneath the surface. Whitewater hydraulics are a silent killer. Known for their immense force, these water features are formed when currents crash into submerged rocks, creating a deadly loop that traps anything caught inside. Even the strongest swimmers, and Caleb was among them, stood little chance against the pull if they were caught at the wrong angle. The river, which he had mastered for years, had claimed him. The search began immediately. Rescue teams dropped into the water, their ropes snaking through the turbulent rapids. Helicopters buzzed overhead, their blades fighting the roar of the river. Divers tried to enter the hydraulics base, but the current was too fierce. It wasn't until 48 hours later, when the river finally slowed enough to allow them in, that they found him. Caleb's body was wedged between rocks, trapped beneath a shelf of stone. His life vest was still secured, his hands scratched and raw from fighting for air, but the river had been stronger. After Caleb's death, the Gauley River seemed to lose some of its wild spirit. Tourists, aware of the tragedy, hesitated to face the same rapids that had claimed a legend. Guides spoke of the river feeling different, less chaotic, almost as if it mourned Caleb's absence. His legacy wasn't just in his technical skill, but in his calm, unshakable presence, inspiring others to approach life's chaos with the same fearless grace. It was July 27, 1996, when the joyful spirit of the Atlanta Summer Olympics was shattered by a devastating act of domestic terrorism. That night, as thousands gathered in Centennial Olympic Park to celebrate the Games with music and festivities, a pipe bomb exploded, killing 2 people and injuring 111 others. Among those tragically lost was 44-year-old Alice Hawthorne, a devoted mother from Georgia, who had come to the park with her daughter to soak in the once-in-a-lifetime Olympic experience. What began as a night of unity and celebration ended in horror, forever altering the lives of those present and leaving a deep scar on the legacy of the Games. The 1996 Summer Olympics in Atlanta were envisioned as a grand celebration of athletic prowess and international unity, a moment where the world could come together to witness the pinnacle of human achievement. However, this vision was shattered by a horrific act of domestic terrorism that left an indelible mark on the history of the Games. On the night of July 27, 1996, as spectators gathered in Centennial Olympic Park to enjoy the festivities, a pipe bomb exploded, killing 2 people and injuring 111 others. Among the victims was Alice Hawthorne, a 44-year-old mother from Georgia, whose tragic death became a symbol of the human cost of senseless violence. Alice had brought her daughter to the park that night to take part in the joyful atmosphere of the Olympics. It was supposed to be a moment of bonding and celebration, but it ended in heartbreak. When the bomb detonated, shrapnel tore through the crowd and Alice was fatally struck. Her daughter survived, forced to witness the horrifying loss of her mother in what should have been a night of unity and joy. The pain of that night reverberated far beyond Atlanta, striking at the very heart of what the games represent. In the immediate aftermath of the explosion, chaos reigned. The park, once filled with laughter and music, became a scene of panic and devastation. Emergency responders rushed in, trying to make sense of the destruction and save lives where they could. Amidst the turmoil, security guard Richard Jewell emerged as an unlikely hero. His quick actions in noticing the suspicious backpack and helping evacuate the area likely prevented an even greater loss of life. Yet in a cruel twist of fate, Jewell's heroism was soon overshadowed by suspicion. Wrongfully implicated in the bombing, he became the target of an intense media frenzy and an FBI investigation that would leave his reputation and life in tatters. It wasn't until October 1996 that Jewell was officially cleared by the FBI. His innocence acknowledged far too late to undo the damage. Meanwhile, the real perpetrator, Eric Rudolph, remained at large. Driven by extremist hatred against abortion and the U.S. government, Rudolph would go on to carry out additional bombings. His campaign of terror, a chilling reminder of the threat he posed. It would take nearly 7 years before he was finally captured in 2003, bringing long overdue justice for the lives he destroyed, including that of Alice Hawthorne. The bombing at Centennial Olympic Park serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of even the most joyous gatherings. It underscores the importance of vigilance, security, and the compassionate response of those who step forward in times of crisis. And it calls on us to remember victims like Alice Hawthorne, not just as statistics in a tragic event, but as individuals whose lives were filled with love, purpose, and hope. In honoring their memory, we strengthen our resolve to protect the spirit of unity that the Olympics strive to embody. It was September 2nd, 2023, a bright, clear day in San Pedro, Mexico, where a joyous celebration was about to turn into a nightmare. Luis Angel N., a 32-year-old pilot, prepared for what should have been a routine flight, a gender reveal stunt for an expectant couple. The small Piper PA-25 aircraft had been fitted with a special mechanism to release colored smoke, announcing to the gathered crowd whether the couple's baby would be a boy or a girl. For Luis, this was familiar territory. He had performed similar stunts before, releasing colored powder from his aircraft for celebrations. The job was straightforward. Fly low over the party, release the pink smoke to reveal the couple was having a girl, and continue on his way. It was the kind of gig that combined his passion for flying with the joy of helping others celebrate life's precious moments. The couple stood beneath a large illuminated sign reading, "Oh Baby," surrounded by friends and family eagerly awaiting the big reveal. Cameras were rolling, ready to capture the moment of surprise and delight. No one could have imagined they would instead document a tragedy. As Luis approached the gathering in his single-engine crop duster, everything initially went according to plan. The aircraft descended to approximately 200 feet above the ground, low enough for the dramatic effect, but still within safe operating parameters. The pink smoke began to trail behind the plane, eliciting cheers from the crowd below. Simultaneously, confetti cannons on the ground exploded with pink paper, confirming the news. A baby girl was on the way. The couple embraced, their faces beaming with joy, completely unaware of what was happening in the sky above them. Just seconds after releasing the colored smoke, as Luis attempted to bank the aircraft away from the celebration, disaster struck. The left wing of the Piper PA-25 suddenly failed. Whether due to structural stress, a mechanical failure, or the additional strain of the low-altitude maneuver, the wing catastrophically collapsed. Aviation experts who later analyzed the footage suggested that Luis may have pulled too hard on the control stick, overstressing the wings during the turn. The aircraft immediately lost lift and began to spin uncontrollably. Luis, with likely only seconds to react, found himself in an unrecoverable flat spin. The plane spiraled toward the ground at a terrifying rate, disappearing behind trees and buildings as it plummeted. The impact occurred just a few hundred yards from the celebration. The sound of the crash was drowned out by the music and cheering, a cruel juxtaposition of joy and tragedy occurring simultaneously. While the couple continued celebrating their news, Luis lay critically injured in the twisted wreckage of his aircraft. Emergency services rushed to the scene, extracting Luis from the mangled cockpit. Paramedics from the Sinaloa Red Cross provided immediate treatment before transporting him to a nearby hospital. Despite their best efforts, Luis succumbed to his injuries shortly after arrival. The video of the incident went viral, showing the stark contrast between the celebrating couple and the aircraft disintegrating in the background. Viewers were disturbed by how the camera panned back to the joyful couple, seemingly oblivious to the pilot's fate. Luis Angel N. became another tragic statistic in a growing list of gender reveal celebrations gone wrong. Since 2019, these increasingly elaborate events have been linked to multiple deaths, wildfires, and explosions across the globe. For Luis, what began as a routine job ended in the ultimate sacrifice. His story serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly celebration can turn to tragedy, and how the pursuit of the perfect moment can sometimes come at an unimaginable cost. It was November 5, 1983, aboard the Byford Dolphin oil rig in the North Sea off Norway. The massive semi-submersible platform stood above the dark waters, battered by icy winds and stinging rain. Below, deep-sea divers carried out dangerous work, relying on a high-pressure system to survive in depths of up to 1,000 feet. Inside the rig's diving chamber complex, 4 divers were living under immense pressure, 9 atmospheres, about 130 pounds per square inch. This system allowed them to stay pressurized for weeks at a time, eliminating the need for long decompression stops after every dive. The setup included 2 chambers, a diving bell, and a connecting trunk system that kept everything sealed. At 4 a.m., dive tenders William Crammond and Martin Saunders were finishing their shift. Their job was to safely disconnect a diving bell that had just returned 2 men from the ocean floor. In one chamber, Edwin Arthur Coward, 35, and Roy Lucas, 38, were resting. In the other, Bjorn Giver Bergersen, 29, and Truls Hellevik, 34, had just completed their dive. Everything depended on following the proper steps to equalize pressure before disconnecting the bell. The procedure was simple but critical. First, the chamber door had to be sealed. Then, the trunk pressure had to be adjusted. Only after that could the clamp securing the diving bell be released. But in the dim morning light, something went horribly wrong. Crammond, possibly confused by noise or poor visibility, released the clamp too soon, before the chamber door was fully closed. In an instant, disaster struck. The pressure inside the chamber plummeted from 9 atmospheres to 1 in less than a second. The force was so powerful that it launched the diving bell away, striking Crammond with deadly force. Inside the chamber, the rapid decompression had even more horrifying consequences. The nitrogen in the diver's blood turned into gas, expanding violently and rupturing their internal organs. Coward, Lucas, and Bergersen died instantly. Hellevik, who had been near the opening, suffered the worst fate. The sudden pressure difference pulled his entire body through the partially closed 24-inch hatch, killing him instantly. The aftermath was gruesome. Investigators found parts of Hellevik's body scattered across the deck. His organs had been expelled intact, while his bones had been shattered. Saunders, though severely injured by the flying diving bell, was the only survivor. Investigators later found that the Byford Dolphin lacked key safety features, fail-safes that could have prevented the accident. The Norwegian Petroleum Directorate had even allowed the rig to continue operating without them, despite requiring other facilities to install similar protections. For 26 years, the victims' families fought for justice. In 2009, after decades of legal battles, the Norwegian government finally admitted responsibility and awarded compensation. The Byford Dolphin remained in service until 2019, when it was finally scrapped. The accident led to significant changes in diving safety, including pressure sensors and automatic safety locks to prevent premature clamp releases. But for those who witnessed the disaster, the memory of that morning, a sudden rush of air, the deafening blast, and the unimaginable destruction served as a lasting reminder of the dangers of deep-sea diving and the deadly cost of human error. Thanks for watching. Don't stop here. Click the video on your screen now for more horrifying stories.